Welcome to this webinar. Now, the first thing I need to say, there'll be no upsell or offer to buy a course or anything like that in this webinar. This is the second webinar I've done. This one is about our Goldmine framework, creating product offerings to grow your business. And when I talk about products, I'm talking about service offerings. We call them products because we package a service up to be like a product that you could buy from a shop. So let's get into it. I want to take you back to a time that was quite monumental in our own business. It's 2005. Weirdly, it's the morning of my 26th birthday. I've spent the last 7 months working on one of the largest tenders we've ever put together. We've been working with this particular client for about 6 years. But 7 months ago, they decided to bundle everything that they buy into a single contract. It means if we don't win this contract, we could lose a lot of revenue. But if we do win it, our workload will go up massively from this one client because they're committing to investing a lot of money into renovating all of their property stock. There's only one other company that's running against us for this particular contract, but they're about 100 times bigger than us. And through their parent company, they can offer a one-stop shop for everything that the client needs. So I've spent the last 7 months pulling together the people that we need to let us take on this contract to the same extent that they could deliver it. I've been expecting an update from the client for about a week now. I'm moving some boxes in a stock room. John, one of our engineers, walks through and he hands me this envelope with my name on it. I see the client's logo on the postmark and my stomach just drops. I'm nervous to open it to see what it says, but John can see that I look nervous for some reason. I open the envelope and I start reading. Looks important. Oh yeah, I've been waiting for this to arrive. This is a tender I've been working on for the last 7 months. It's been a lot of work. What does it say? I feel tears rolling down my cheeks. I'm not usually this emotional, but it feels like everything that I've done for the past year has led to this moment. Didn't we win it? What's wrong? It'll be another one. I didn't know you cared so much about winning these contracts, Wayne. I read the letter out loud to him. Thank you for your work over the last 7 months. It's been a pleasure working with you and your business over the last 6 years. We're pleased to inform you that you've been successful in your tender submission. The contract value is 4.85 million. Please arrange at your earliest convenience to meet us so we can discuss starting the contract. We'd won the contract, and this was a big moment for the company, cementing its place in that location. It also meant we could move forward with our plans to build a new office in that area. But none of this would have happened if we'd not created new product offerings in our business leading up to that point. The reason we were in the running for this contract against companies that were 100 times our size was because we had the capability to deliver everything that they needed under one contract. And that's what this webinar is about. Over the next 70 minutes or so, I'm going to show you how we did this. And now with the system that we created by going through that process many times since that day, and with lots of different businesses, our own and other people's, we've developed a system so that we can create new product offerings easily and quickly. The most common way people think about growing a business is they try to get new customers. The problem with that, it costs money to market to new customers. It takes time to convert these targets into paying customers. It takes time to build those relationships. It adds overhead to the business because not only have you got extra costs in marketing, but you also need more people to fill that sales role. And then when you've won the customer, someone then needs to manage them. Apart from staff wages, this also adds to your overhead with things like extra office space, expenses, maybe vehicles. The other downside with this route is it's unpredictable. You cannot predict with accuracy how many new customers you'll get next month, how much they'll spend, and when they'll spend it. So a better way for you to increase your sales is just to sell more to your existing clients. This is why we call this the Goldmine framework, because having a pool of clients that you already have a relationship with means you can keep selling as much as you want to them. It's like having your own gold mine that you can keep tapping into. This is what we basically did in our own business. But back then, it just seemed like the natural way to grow. We did win new clients, but what I enjoyed most was setting up these new offerings. And I remember thinking, if I could just do this all of the time, I would be happy. It was only about 20 years later when I looked back and analysed what had been a success and what hadn't, with the various businesses I've been involved with, that I spotted a pattern of the most successful times had always come from creating new product offerings. You might have heard this term used before, but one of the things to measure in your business is called customer lifetime value. And what that is the average amount your customers spend with your business during the lifetime of working with them. So to calculate that, you basically add up how much each client spent with you in total since he first started buying from your business. Now, if you only get one sale each time, then that calculation is going to be easy. But if you're selling to them 10 times a year for 10 years, then it might take you a bit longer. So you can see in this example, the average total spend from all clients was 102,000 each, and the average time that they worked with the business was 26 months. Now that you know that, if you can increase either of those two metrics, then your business is going to grow its profits, because you're not looking for external new customers, and that means you're not spending money on marketing. So the goal is to try and sell them everything that they need. So they don't need to go anywhere else. They can buy everything that they need from one supplier, which also reduces their own costs, and that kind of happy spiral continues. So let me take you through what we did in our first business and how we did it really quickly, which ultimately led to that moment of winning the £5 million contract. And the thing with all these businesses over the years is, some of them, looking back in hindsight, there are things we could have done better to improve the results that we got, as well as to speed up that creation process, and as I'll tell you about in a minute. But I suppose if we came to this planet knowing the best way to do everything right from day one, then things would probably be a bit boring. So what did we do? If you see my other webinar on our growth framework, you'll already know the story of how we grew. But if you've not seen it, basically our business was based on the west coast of Scotland. My parents had moved there in 1990 from Nottingham, and after building a house for a relative, they decided to stay there. Now, if you've been there before, you'll know there just isn't that much there, and everything is spread out massively. You need to go to the supermarket, you've got a 60-mile round trip to get there. Now, I started work in 1995, and at that time, there was myself, my dad, and one other apprentice. My granddad had worked in the business as a joiner, but when I left school, he retired so he could build his own house. So that left three of us, and the business generally provided electrical contracting services then. But from 1997, over the next 13 years or so, we grew that business all over Scotland, with staff, clients, and contracts all over the country. And actually, one of the reasons we grew it like that was because we were initially based on the West Coast, and the fact is there aren't many people actually live there. So we really struggled to get staff. And most of the staff we did employ, they lived in other places across Scotland, and they come and stay and work locally during the week, and then they go home at the weekends. And that obviously had its own problem on its own, because a lot of these people had families or girlfriends at home. So we found they come and work with us for maybe 6 months or a year, and then they get sick of working away from home and they quit. So we thought, well, if we can grow to other areas, we can employ staff in those other areas, and then we can just borrow them when we need and kind of swap them around for the different contracts all over the place. But after we'd grown the business in 2009, we sold it. And I won't bore you with what I did next, but you can watch my other webinar to learn more about if you're interested. But one of the key things we did to grow that business was to create new product offerings. And actually, what I've done in every business I've been involved with is to create new product offerings. Now, the first thing I want to emphasize, every time we did this was creating a new product offering to sell to our existing customers. So we already had someone to buy it from us. We weren't creating something in the hope of finding a new customer for it. This part is important because it's a bit like the example of digging a hole in the desert. You probably want to be close to that flow of either where the money is or where the customers are. Otherwise, you've got an uphill battle of not only creating it from scratch, but then also trying to sell it to people you don't even know. And I'm saying this because there's been a couple of times when I did make that mistake. I made products expecting to find new customers, and it just didn't really go to plan. So I'm pretty sure this was our first offering that we created, but this came about because we had a partner who had a connection with various electrical manufacturers like Sony and Bosch. And they wanted to try and set up a wholesaler selling electrical appliances. And the prices were really good. I remember buying this big Sony stereo that I wanted, and Dixon's was selling it for about £800, but I ended up paying just under 300. So the prices were about a third of what you pay on the high street. So we bought a few items ourselves just to make sure everything went smoothly. And then we set up our electrical appliances division. And initially we started selling to everyone. We'd put adverts in the newspaper and we'd send out flyers, but we found it was really time consuming to sell one-off items to people. So instead we stopped selling to individuals, and instead we switched to just selling to our larger commercial clients. And this is a perfect example of setting up a new product to sell to your existing clients. We wasted so much time and money trying to attract new customers to buy these appliances. In a way, we were trying to compete against Dixon's and the rest of the high street, when in fact, we already had a Goldmine right under our nose. So for example, an average order might be made up of, say, 60 TVs, selling them to a hotel. And as part of all this, we also offered additional services like installation, which meant we could create more work for the rest of the business. We also set up credit finance, which meant we could sell more because the customers could spread the cost. So this ended up attracting new clients too, because say a hotel was renovating a few of its bedrooms, they'd hear about us selling appliances and they'd buy from us. Then because they got such a good service, they'd then come to us for the other work. So without us doing this, we might have won those clients. The next offering we created was PAT testing, or portable appliance testing. Now, this was something that we already did as a one-off service, but we decided to package it up as a standalone service. Because before that, clients would ask us if we could do it because they weren't sure. And they'd been approached by specialist PAT testing companies. So we decided to set it up as a proper standalone offering. And again, we ended up winning new clients that just wanted that service. None of our local competitors actively advertised that they do it. So again, we won clients like that too. The next one came about after we took over a maintenance contract with a hotel group. And we kept getting call outs to their hotels. The hotels up to that point, they hadn't really been maintained very well. They employed their own handyman in each hotel, and they just basically bodge everything that just to make it work. One of the hotels almost went up in flames because of it. And we were called at the same time as the fire brigade, and our engineer actually arrived at the hotel and found a light fitting with smoke coming from it. So he disconnected it just as the fire brigade turned up. But as part of our contract with this hotel group, they wanted us to suggest ways that they could be more innovative and save money. And I knew if we could fix this call out issue, that would save them money, plus it would make us look good. And at the same time, as far as I know, there was only one other company in the UK at that time that specialized in doing this, a company called Parkercell. I think they were taken over by Dalkia just after we set up doing this. But I looked at what they were doing and I thought, why don't we set up a specialist offering to provide specialist lighting maintenance as a standalone business. And so from that, we ended up with the new maintenance contracts with not only our existing clients, but then others too. And they loved it because nobody else had suggested to them how they could save money on the lighting costs and reduce the maintenance costs as well, just by properly maintaining the lighting systems. But also it made us look like experts at what we did, whereas our competitors just looked like basic firms. And from a positioning point of view, that's what you want to do. The next one, which went okay, it gave us extra work, but it could have definitely gone better, and that was ventilation. We had quite a few clients with ventilation systems, whether that was hotels with hundreds of extract fans in the hotel rooms, or in commercial kitchens where they had these big canopy fans. At the time, we were really stretched for finding staff, but one of our clients asked us if we could take it on, and we didn't want to refuse because it might have opened the door for one of our competitors. As it went well, we thought, well, we might as well offer it to our other clients as well. But then we got other companies approaching us, asking us to do it for them as well. So we ended up dropping the ball a bit. In hindsight, we'd have been probably been better to just team up with a ventilation company and let them do it, or perhaps even buy a ventilation company and let them do it. Because we were just too busy to take it on in-house and to be able to really maximize it. I think the lesson there is having a partner that can deliver, because it really is impossible to do absolutely everything yourself. The next major offering we created was a fire and security division. And at the time, we had clients where they'd be using one of the national fire alarm companies, mentioning no names, but they'd complain to us saying they were really frustrated by them. But we didn't have the skills or experience to properly maintain the systems at that point. So we asked them, if we invest into training our staff and buying the equipment, would they take on a maintenance contract with us? And that's how it started. And the good thing about this particular offering, every time our clients would get the major works done, such as building a new property or renovating one that they already owned, then we'd be the named contractors on that project, which meant we were guaranteed to get the project regardless of who did the rest of the contract or how much our price was. And this is probably the most valuable part, because each maintenance contract might have been, say, £1,000 a year, whereas a single project might have been 100,000 or more. I'll just tell you about one more. So after that, we were starting to see more and more clients talk about improving their IT systems. It was around 2002 at the time. So the internet was just kind of starting to be rolled out a bit more mainstream. Hotels were installing EPOS point of sale systems, and our public sector clients were upgrading their own systems in the schools and in their offices. So we did the same again. We asked our clients, if we train our staff to install and maintain these data and telecoms networks, would they give us the contract to provide them? And they did. And so from there, two things happened. We serviced our own clients, but then we'd also partner with data and telecoms companies in other areas. They tender for contracts with their clients that had premises in our area. But because we covered such a large area, we had staff based in these areas every day. It was much more efficient for us to do the contract for them than for them to send staff, say, 200 miles and have them working away. And then the second thing that happened was our competitors would actually direct their clients to us to provide these specialist services, because they firstly didn't know how to do it themselves, and second, they just didn't have the capacity to do it themselves. So they'd continue with their day-to-day maintenance work, and we take on the larger or more specialist projects for them. There were other product offerings that we set up in addition to these, but you kind of get the idea. In terms of the timing, I'd say it probably took about 9 months to a year between setting up each of these different offerings. And looking back at it, we could definitely have done it faster if I was dedicated solely to doing that. but I wasn't. We had a business to run, as well as dealing with a constant flow of new clients. So actually, I said there are things that we could have done better, and this was probably one of them. Just dedicating our time to creating each of these instead of working on it for an hour, then doing something else. Whereas if I was free just to work on each new product offering, it would have happened much faster. But also, it would probably be a better kind of product offering and be much faster too, because whereas with everything new, you get little hiccups at the start. But if you're working on a million other things at the same time, those hiccups, they look more like mountains at the time. So the problem with saying that, though, finding good staff was one of our biggest headaches. So again, that probably wasn't feasible for me to do that anyway. And before we move forward, I just want to introduce you to a couple of concepts to get your brain thinking about the possibilities. The first is what we call the product ladder. And the product ladder is, if you think about it like a ladder with different levels, and at each level you have a product, and at each level the price of that product is different. And the higher you go, the more expensive the product. So to look at the most obvious example, which you've probably seen a lot of times, let's look at a typical training company. And let's say this training company, their main product offering is to provide classroom-based 5-day training programs, and they cost, let's say, $5,000. Now, what could they provide at those other lower levels on that product ladder? Well, the lowest level product might be some kind of free how-to videos on YouTube. But the next level up might be the training resources like training manuals that they might sell individually, or they might package them up together as a bundle and charge, say, £100 for them. And the next level up, they might create a shortened version of the course, maybe a 2-day introduction course that costs $1,000. They might repackage what they already offer and offer it in different formats. So if they pay £1,000 for face-to-face training, they might do an online version for $700. Then another way to think about the product ladder is the 3 levels of do it yourself, done with you, and done for you. Again, at each of these levels, the price changes. And creating a product that helps each level, because otherwise, if you're only targeting buyers that want the top level offering, that means you might be losing 80% of your audience. And if someone is going to do it themselves, it doesn't matter what you do or what you say, they'll still do it themselves. So you might as well sell something to them that helps them to do it themselves. That way you make money from the process as well. Likewise, some people say, if I tell them how to do it themselves, why would they then use me? But if you think about it, if you decide to redecorate your house, someone sends you a bunch of videos on how to decorate your house. Does that mean you'll redecorate it yourself? No, it doesn't. What it does mean, though, is you'll see that person that sent you the videos as the expert, because they'll be demonstrating that they know what they're doing. And it works the same way for your business. Only this way, you actually make money from it. The second concept I want to talk about is what we call the product ecosystem. And actually, the product ladder and the product ecosystem both blend into each other. The only real difference is one is more focused on the various price levels. With the product ecosystem, it's about thinking about what else is your client buying? What else do they need? What are they buying before they buy your product? What are they buying afterwards? Is there anything they need to buy alongside your product? And what else are your competitors offering? It's about creating complementary products. Products that complement what you already do. And there's a good reason for this. I remember about 5 years ago, I read a report that had been written where some organization, they surveyed a lot of different businesses. And basically the results came back and it said about 90%, I can't remember the exact number, but about 90% of those businesses surveyed were looking for suppliers that could provide everything that they needed. One point of contact for everything that they were buying. And that reminded me of the contract I've spoke about earlier. That's everything from buying pencils and stationery to buying services like plumbing services or recruitment. But the reason behind that was because it meant that they could reduce the procurement cost on their side. If they only have to get quotes from, say, 3 companies for everything that they need, well, it's going to be much cheaper and less time consuming on their side than getting quotes from, say, 60 companies that each supply a single service. Just the time involvement of dealing with each individual company. That's 60 phone calls, 60 emails, 60 quotes, 60 presentations. Or they can just use 3 companies and get everything they need in a single quote from a single supplier. And when the contract's in place, that's also one point of contact to manage the contract. And then again, one point of contact for invoicing. It's one invoice. How long will it take a company to process 60 invoices every month versus just processing one? The time saving is huge. So you can start and see the motivation of why they do that. And I think this will start and trickle down into even the smallest businesses. It probably already has to some extent. If you think about everything you buy now, how time consuming would it be if you had to go out and get quotes and then order each item from each individual supplier? You want pencils, so you go to the pencil shop. You want paper, so you go to the paper shop. It's just that what we're talking about now, it's moved up a level from these single product items. And now we're talking about every service offering coming under that one umbrella. If you look closely, you'll probably see your biggest competitors. They already have something in place that accommodates this, whether it's in the same company or whether they've got a string of different companies all in the same group. So you'll excuse my drawing of an umbrella, but this image is supposed to represent an umbrella, and I think it's quite good, actually. But the more you can provide, the better your chances of not only keeping your clients, but also attracting new clients as well. And obviously, as a small business, you're probably not going to be able to provide everything, but you can start by bolting on similar product offerings to what you already do. Those type of products or services that complement what your business already provides. So here's a few examples of the levels of growth that we've achieved by creating new product offerings in our own businesses. And it's why I think it's so important to use this strategy in your own business. And what you'll find is when you've got these other product offerings, you'll actually attract new clients. Clients that might not have wanted your original offering, but instead they want one of these complementary products. And that means you get to build that trust with them. And over time, they'll then end up buying your other products too. Okay, so you're probably thinking, Wayne, when are we going to get into this framework? And the answer is now. Let's get into it. So this is the process that we now go through every time we create a new product. And before now, this process was done unconsciously. And it wasn't until I thought about how we could get more people involved so we could reduce the time it takes to create products that I created this framework. This was created so we could teach other people how to do it and then measure progress of each project against that, but without us having to be directly involved. And you'll see this, it's made up of 36 stages that are bunched together into 6 phases. Now you might be asking, why am I giving you this away for free? And there was a time in my own life I thought we could do everything ourselves. But after I reflected over the last 25 years of working, I noticed that when we tried to do everything ourselves, we didn't get the results that we wanted to get. And we've since learned that it's actually easier and faster for everyone to grow a business just by working with certain partners. And when I say partners, I mean where each partner focuses on what they do best. I'm talking about being partners with us on certain projects. The projects that we work on are on a big scale. We're either talking about projects that can be on a national level, or they could be a global level. But our ethos is to support and work with small local businesses. And so that creates a bit of a problem for us, because many of the smaller local businesses that we partner with, they just can't deliver on a national scale. So for us to deliver what we create, it means we need to find and work with other partners in new areas. Now, what we do best, if we could only pick one thing, then it would be creating new products and service offerings. We're investors in innovation and new ways of doing things. How we normally do that is to create the product offering which normally comes from us identifying a gap in the market, or something that could be done better in some way, and we work with selected partners. We bring all of the pieces together and we package it up as a new product offering. And this new product offering might normally be something that sits alongside the partner's business to complement what they already do. Sometimes it can be providing a new client base to them. Sometimes it can be to sell additional product offerings to their existing customers. But for our current model of working, how it came about for us to work in this way, it all happened inside probably a couple of weeks. You might have heard me say this before. Now, I think it was probably lots of little things that led up to that point, but the realization came about within a couple of weeks. And in that 2 weeks, I was approached by quite a few small businesses looking for investment. And there's nothing new about that. I normally get 40 to 50 different companies every week looking for investment anyway. But what made this different was I noticed these all had big problems that if I was to ever to get involved with these businesses, I'd literally have to tear them apart and start from scratch. And although they were good businesses, they had good clients, they had good staff, the service that they provided was good quality. The problem was the business was just not run very well. For example, one of them, they used their own personal bank account to run the business through, and he'd never filed any accounts since he started running the business. Another, they didn't know how to price contracts. They just plucked a number out of the air and then hoped for the best. And this was the same issues I was seeing in every business I looked at during those 2 weeks. And I'm a big believer that maybe the universe was giving me some kind of sign. And so I had a bit of an epiphany. Rather than investing in their business and then growing it from there, why don't I just create the perfect business from the start with all of the systems in place where everything is run professionally, it's all branded properly, and then just get those other businesses to deliver their part of it. That way, they could achieve the growth that they wanted, but I didn't have to rip the business apart and start again from scratch. So that's really how the current model of how we work developed to what it is today. Here's a few of the projects and companies that we've been involved with creating products over the years. But now we've gone through that, let's get into this framework. So I think I said before, this framework is made up of 36 stages, which cover 6 phases of the creation process. Here's the overall framework, and we'll go through each of these stages individually, looking at the process. So we start off with what we call the seed phase. And before I go any further with this, I need to explain that if if we give something a particular name or label it in a certain way, it doesn't necessarily correspond to what other people might call that same period in the process. If you're involved with startup businesses, for example, you'll know that there are various labels such as seed or pre-revenue. I won't say it doesn't match up to this. Some parts will, but don't take it for granted that it's an exact match, because we didn't create it to match up to other people's labels. This was created for our own purposes. So this first phase is called the seed phase. And what we start with is the stage we call resource. Now, what this is we need to start out with the basic resources that we're going to need for this initial phase of the process. That means being able to investigate if there's an opportunity or not, and to perfect that idea. This phase in the process isn't about creating anything yet. So you need enough resource in time and money just to take it to that level. And not every product makes it past this phase. I was working with one partner and we spent almost 18 months just looking at the possibility of creating this particular product. But in the end, we ended up walking away from it because they just couldn't decide whether to move forward or not. There were too many people involved in the decision process, and none of them wanted to make the decision. So we ended up walking away. The next stage is called people. For this stage, we need to identify who is the right person or people to take on this initial short project. Who will lead it? And the type of people you need are probably going to be analytical types. You might have a creative person in there as well, someone who can see opportunities or a gap in the market and a better way of doing things. Me personally, I'm the creative person, but I do spend some time doing the analytical side too, because I find that it can actually help me come up with new ideas. The third stage is called audience owners. Now, this could be you. If you have a good sized set of customers, then you'll want to create a product to sell to them. The reason we have this in the process is because we're a product creation company. So we don't work directly with customers. We work with other companies to create products for their customers. So this phase for us is about identifying the right companies to work with. I'm not sure if you've heard of Pininfarina before. If not, then you've definitely seen or even experienced their products before. They design cars, but they also create a few high-end buildings as well. But they don't sell direct to the customer. They will design and build a car that the car manufacturers then sell to their customers. So like us, they don't have lots of customers to sell to. They work in partnership with other people to create something and then sell it to their partners' customers. This is about everyone focusing on what they do best. The fourth stage is called needs. Thinking about the customer. What needs do the customers have? And this is a chance where you'll brainstorm and learn all the various needs that your customers have. What do they need? And then the fifth stage is called competition. And this stage is about identifying what else is available to fill that need. What are your competitors doing to fill that need? Maybe there's more than one form of competition that you're probably not even thinking about. If we use an example to explain it, we all have needs, don't we? One of those needs is going to the toilet. Now, if you're a toilet manufacturer, you might think your competition is the other toilet manufacturers down the road, but it's not. These are the direct competitors. But you also have indirect competition too. Let's just imagine for a second, what do you normally do to fill that need? There's a few options. You could use an adult nappy. That's one example of indirect competition. You could use a bedpan. You could use a colostomy bag. Or you could use the outdoors and just dig a hole. But you might say, Wayne, you still need a toilet to flush it away. But I'd argue you don't need a toilet to get rid of it. You could always just put it on your vegetable patch in the garden. It might make your carrots grow. So these are all forms of competition for your business and competition for filling your customers' needs. It's important that you look at competition in both direct, which you would normally look at, but also indirect. And then the final stage in this phase is called options. And this is about analyzing the various options that you might have available to fill that need and solve that idea. So you could create a new product, which is what we're talking about here, or you might work in joint venture partnership with us, for example, to create it together. You might decide to invest in a startup business that's already creating what you want. You might choose to buy a license or a franchise from someone that's already created that product that you can then use. You might buy a business if you can find one that does what you'd like it to do. Or you could look at doing some kind of referral partnership. But these are the sort of options that you'll look at to move to the next phase in the process. The next phase is the design phase. And this is where we start to shape the overall product offering of what it will look like based on what we learned in the seed phase. So the first phase is this phase that we call model. And this is where we design the business model. Now, sometimes you can go into a business and spot that something just isn't working. You might already have the customers, but for some reason, things just aren't working right. And if you see my other webinar on the growth framework, you'll know that after we sold our own business, I went to a renewable energy startup. Now, this business, when I arrived, was trying to sell fairly expensive biomass boilers to large estate owners to install them into their cottages on their estates. Now, the problem was the boilers were about 6 times the price of a standard gas or oil boiler. But these estate owners were asset rich, but cash poor. They just didn't have the money to afford to install these boilers on a large scale. We might have got one cottage on one estate and then that would have been it. But the other issue was these boilers took up a lot more space than just having a normal gas boiler. They needed a dedicated outhouse or boiler room away from the cottage. So after understanding what the issues were, in an afternoon, we ended up redesigning the business model. And although lots of companies do it now, we were the first to use this model back then. The main issue was affordability and space. So the first thing we did, we installed the boiler equipment inside a 20-foot shipping container. And then we ordered a second 20-foot shipping container together with the first, which we used as a fuel store for storing the wood chips. We'd make them look nice. The client could choose what type of cladding they'd like on the outside. So it ended up matching their existing building if they wanted. But this meant we could create our own production line off-site, away from the clients, which meant we could basically supply these units anywhere in the UK because we didn't have to send lots of staff 500 miles away, for example, for months at a time. 95% of the work was done at our own manufacturing premises. Then after the units were built, we'd transport them to the client's site, and we'd send a couple of engineers for a day just to connect everything up to their own buildings. The second issue was affordability. Now, these packaged boiler rooms, after all that labor cost, were quite expensive. I think the cheapest one we built was about 300,000. So we definitely needed a solution to this price issue. And what we did was, rather than charging the customer that 300,000 to install the system, instead we became an energy supplier instead. So we built the equipment, we sent it to site, we connected it up, we'd fill up the wood chip store when it got low, and we'd maintain the equipment throughout the year. But all that the client would pay for was the energy that they used. So if they used 10 units of heat, we'd send them a bill for 10 units of energy at a set price. By doing this, it meant they could upgrade their heating equipment, but it also meant our profit margins jumped massively as well. The cost that we charged the client for the heat that they used paid the cost of building that containerized boiler room. And after we'd done that, we were then able to use outside investor funds to basically finance that build cost. So it completely flipped that original model on its head. And people always ask me how we managed to take a business that was basically struggling to find clients for 2 years and grow it to be the largest biomass energy company in the UK, twice the size of the next company. And I think this is probably the first time I've actually explained how we did that. We went from a company employing 3 staff and doing about 180,000 a year in revenue to a company that employed 44 staff with 6 million revenue and a 10 million pipeline in under 2 years. So moving on to the next stage, and what we do next is to brainstorm what pieces are needed. This is called the jigsaw stage. So as with the previous example, there are certain key pieces that were needed for that business model to work. Like we needed to finance the build cost ourselves. So we needed external investors to be able to do that. So that's one piece. Another key piece we needed was having the manufacturing facility, as we were generally building 3 or 4 of these containers at the same time. And the build duration took anything up to 3 months each. So that's potentially a space large enough to house about 10 storage containers, plus space to work on them as well. Then we needed the staff with the right skills to create the units. So this included having our own designers as well as engineers and welders to build everything. And of course, we also needed a transport company to then transport the units to the client site as well. And as we grew and started to win clients all over the UK, we then needed subcontractors based locally who could go and do site surveys for us, as well as help with the install and maintenance at the site. So although we had quite a big team of our own staff, we also had a big team of subcontractors based all over the country as well. But this design stage is about identifying what pieces we need. After the jigsaw stage, we move on to the viability stage. Is it viable to create the product? Will it make any money? This is where we calculate how many clients we'll need and what the price will need to be in order for us to make the product work. And if we're investing a lot of money to create that product, we need to have the confidence that we'll get our money back, or better still, make a good enough profit so that we can get outside investors involved and have them actually finance the project with us. The fourth stage is what we call offer. And this stage is about creating that overall basic model. What are we selling and what will the offer to the client be? After we've created the offer, it's time to speak to the clients in the test stage and just get their feedback and see if they're interested. You might remember in my own examples earlier, every time we thought about creating a new offering, we go to our clients and we'd ask them, if we invest in training our staff and creating this, will you let us take over the contract? And that's what this stage is about. We haven't actually created anything physical at this point, but by getting their feedback and seeing what percentage of people are interested, as well as what they're willing to pay for it, it lets us know if it's something that we should move forward with. To give you an example, I remember when we created our fire alarm division, we asked the clients And I remember a few of them saying they'd give us the contract on the condition that we provided a 1 hour call out response, and we did the contract for the same price as the existing provider. So for us, this was a case of looking to see if we could firstly provide that call out response, and second, whether we could do it all for the same price as the previous provider. And that's us on to the final stage in the design phase, and that's the decision. So based on the feedback and everything we've learned, do we proceed and create the product? It's at this stage we either restart the process with a better version, we could just drop the whole idea altogether, or we might start from scratch with a whole new idea. But this is where we decide whether to go through to that next phase in the process. And that next process is called the positioning phase. And this is about building a certain perception in the market for the product that we're about to create. This is about giving the product the best chance of success by how we position it to our target customers. And the first stage in this new process is what we call resource 2. And as we did at the seed stage, we need to identify who we need for this part of the journey, as well as how much money we'll need. And this is about creating a product and taking it to our local market. It'll be a much smaller market than trying to roll out to everyone. And normally, we're looking for something that will grow to about maybe 100,000 in revenue in this phase. So we need the people and the money to be able to take it to that level. Next, the second stage is register. And this is where we really start making that idea come to life. In this stage, we register the product, such as registering the name, the trademark, and any domain names that we think that we might use. That includes a patent if patent is relevant. Because we wouldn't want to create something and then not be able to launch it in the market because someone else has named the product the same name. Next is brand. This is where we go through the branding process for the new product. We come up with a logo, as well as the colors and the general feel for the brand. And the fourth stage in this positioning phase is interest. And this is about starting to build up interest in the new product. It's starting to build buzz in the market with potential customers. Perhaps even giving them somewhere that they can register their interest or even order and pay in advance. Sometimes you'll see book authors using this method, where they'll create a web page to sell the book. People will pre-order it, but the author hasn't even started to write it yet. But by selling pre-orders, it means that it pays them for those publishing costs. For us, if we can get people to sign up or express an interest, it also means some additional interest from the market, and not just from the clients that we initially targeted. The only issue to watch with this stage is if a competitor is watching what you're doing. If you're creating a product that is much more innovative to the market than what they provide, if they know what you're creating, then they might be able to copy it and launch it to the market before you do. One company I like for this stage in the process is called Silent Yachts. This company builds fully electric yachts. They're powered completely by solar panels. But when they first launched their business in its current form, they created a website. And that website looked like they got yachts ready to deliver to people, but actually they'd only got one, which the owners had built for themselves, just as more of an experiment to see if it was really possible to create a fully electric yacht. The cost of building one of these yachts is about $3 million. So you don't really want to be building a load of yachts if nobody actually wants one. So this idea of getting client interest before that happens is the perfect example of why we have this stage in the process. The fifth stage is called experts. Who are the experts in the industry? This stage is about getting some of those experts involved in your project. One example of this, you might remember my story about setting up our fire division. Well, as part of that, we set up partnerships with many of the equipment manufacturers. So not only could we work on their systems, but we also got training from them as well. And associating them with our business gave us more credibility in the market as well. And then the final stage in this positioning phase is called key client. And it's this stage where we want to get a well-known client signed up to the product. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know I talk about the strategy of client partnerships. This is about getting what I call a landmark client on board. The first advantage is to test your product with them without having any backlash. You can perfect it before it goes out to the rest of the market, to the rest of the public. The second is you can then name drop them to other potential clients. You can say, if you're a software company, you can say, I work for Google. So it adds a lot more credibility. If you're working for the biggest client in the industry, then everyone will think that they're missing out on something and they'll also want to work with you. The next phase in the framework is called partners. And you remember earlier in the jigsaw stage, we identified potential pieces that we'd need to make the product a success. Now, some of those pieces you might have in-house, but some of them you'll need to get externally, and that's what this is about. Now, if you've not seen my video about the 4 types of company, watch that next, so you can understand more about what category each type of business that we'll talk about in this section and where they fit in. So the first stage in the partners phase is called influence. And this is about identifying who currently influences your potential partners. Now, you can go directly to potential partners if you like, but what we do is try to find people that already have a relationship with our target partners. Because most of what we create, we're creating it with the intention of taking it nationwide. And for us to identify the right partners in each area, that's an enormous job. Just in the UK, we might have to find 400 different partners, depending on what we're doing and the type of product. So taking that globally, for example, we're talking about thousands of businesses. And to get that number set up as partners, we might have to speak with 10 times that number just to find the right people to suit working with us. So there'll already be people out there who have a good relationship with certain potential partners, and people that know companies that might be looking for a new opportunity to grow the business. So this stage is about identifying who those influencers might be, and then having a conversation with them to see if they can identify a partner that might suit or that might be suitable for your project. Next is the sales stage. And this is about identifying who will perform the sales role to potential clients and building the relationship with them and really just finding the right people that suit our way of working. Now, if you're doing the sales inside your own business, that's fine. But as part of a new product creation, you might find that working with external sales partners might be more efficient, so you can maximize the investment in the product or maximize returns. One example of that, when we set our fire and security division, we didn't really do any direct sales to any new customers ourselves. We had various partnerships set up where our partners would either make an introduction for us to their own clients, or they do the selling for us. So this stage is about getting those people in place. I'm not saying you need a nationwide army of salespeople on day one, but you need to think about the possibilities of how you'll scale it in the future past those initial internal clients, and building those relationships now so it's ready to go later on. The third stage, we need to build demand with clients. This stage is called demand. So it's about getting that buzz going and building up a need with your clients. So they're waiting for the product to launch. And this is where the sales partner comes in handy, because they most likely already have good relationships with clients. So this is about starting to have that conversation about, this is what we're about to launch. How many units do you want me to sign you up for? The fourth stage is called delivery. And this is about finding those partners that will help us to deliver. We might be able to do some of the process ourselves, but for us, it's not really our skill set to worry about delivery, especially when the product could potentially be nationwide. It would be almost impossible to deliver on a national scale by one company going from 0 to national coverage inside 12 months. So regardless of how big your business is, unless it's already a national company with offices in every town and city, then there'll be some pieces that need to be in place for delivery to happen. And this stage in the process is about firstly identifying the right pieces and then building trust with them, ready for them to deliver when that product launches in the next phase. The fifth stage is called infra, and this is short for infrastructure. What infrastructure pieces are needed for your product to be a success? So in our renewable energy example, I shared earlier, the infrastructure pieces that we needed were the manufacturing plant and also the investment partner. So this stage is about building trust with those individuals and getting them bought into the process. So when it's ready to launch, they're also ready to go. And then the final stage is the partners phase. In the partners phase, it's called agreement. And this is pretty obvious, but it's about getting all negotiations sorted out and getting agreements in place before the full launch of the product. So next we're into the launch phase, and this is about taking the idea and making it come to life. We aren't interested in massive growth at this stage. This phase is just about building that basic prototype and making sure it works. The first stage is what we call local. So this is basically creating that small prototype version. We normally do this on a local scale. Rather than trying to launch it on a national scale on day one, we focus on one small area and we get it right in that one small area first. One company you might have seen do this stage really well in the last couple of years is Lotus. They built a new car called the Emira. And what they did was they built a handful of cars, but they were basically just very basic shells with wheels and an engine. They look like finished cars to the outside world, but they launched this new car last year at a special press conference. I think it was down at their test track in Norfolk. But you couldn't drive the car. All you could do was to order one. And it was a day for journalists to kind of see the car, and so they could raise the profile of it. Now, for the last year, since that launch day, they've been developing and building that car further. So they've worked on the suspension and the brakes and the engine. And this is the same as that local stage in our framework. You use this stage to build that basic model. This isn't about mass production at this stage in the process. The second stage in the launch phase is called issues. And this is about identifying any issues with a product. Now, this is why you have that initial key client partner. So you can test the product out on them and find out what the issues are. And the third stage is feedback. And this is where you get feedback from that client to see what they think and how you might be able to improve it. They might have expected something completely different. It's a bit like that new Lotus. If you ordered the car
and then you got in it and the seats were uncomfortable, well, you could tell them while it's still in that launch phase, and then they can work on it to make them more comfortable before it properly launches to the public. Because after you scale the business up, it will be hard and really expensive to change things then. And the fourth stage is refine. And this stage is about taking that feedback and the issues that you identified and just making the product better. The fifth stage is called investable package. It's probably obvious, but in this stage, this is about us making the product and packaging it up so it's attractive, not only to the end customer, but to other parties like external investors. And everyone wants different things. An end client wants their needs satisfied, but an investor, for example, wants a good return with as little risk as possible. They want to see the potential to scale, but also have existing traction in the market. So this stage in the process is packaging the product up to be able to do that. Because to be able to scale, we're probably going to need those external funds. And then the final stage in the launch phase is called systems. And this means systemizing as much of the process as possible. Now, obviously, there might be a small amount to change in systemizing the business later on. But we want to have the systems and infrastructure in place, or at least know what we need to do, so that we're ready to really scale the business in the next phase. And the final phase in the Goldmine framework is the scale phase. And we aren't going to go into too much details about this section on the webinar, because I've covered it in detail on the growth framework webinar. So if you haven't seen that, then go and watch that next. But we basically start off with the foundation framework, building the foundations of the product. At this stage, it's more like transforming the product into a standalone business. We'll work on the vision framework, creating a vision and a strategy for the business over the next 5 years. We'll work on the financial framework, properly managing the financial section of the business. Then we'll work on developing the right team. We'll work on strengthening the farm in the operational framework. I talk more about drivers and farmers and what they are in the growth framework. So go and watch that to understand that idea a bit more. And then finally, we work on the sales flow framework and increasing revenue coming into the business. And we do that primarily over 3 areas. Our first focus is on maximizing the sales from existing clients. Then we'll have a program to attract external new clients. And then finally, we look at growing the geography and the footprint of the product. It doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. Most people fail in life because they major in minor things. Our goals can only be reached through the vehicle of a plan. There is no other route to success. And that leads us perfectly to our penultimate slide. Almost penultimate. So we're working with just a handful of companies this year. We don't have time for any more than that, and we currently have a waiting list of businesses that want to work with us in certain areas. We're only looking for one company in each region. What this means is you're going to have exclusive access to everything we're involved in. I don't expect you to commit to something without knowing the finer details. So if you're interested in what you've seen and heard in this webinar, and you understand that adding new products to your business could be a good way to grow, but you realize that you probably don't have the time or energy to create them yourself, and you think that working with us could be a good plan. If you have any kind of interest or desire to learn more about what we're involved in, or all I ask is to register your interest and apply by clicking the button below this video. And this is by application only, so there's no commitment on either side. Just enter a few details about your business. If we feel you're a good fit to work with us, when we've got a project that might be suitable, we'll send you more details for you to decide if you want to work with us on it. And for those that stuck around to the end, I do have a special gift, my new book. I'll send you a copy of my new book and any future books I write. Just fill in your details when you click to register your interest, and I'll send that over as soon as it's ready. So click the button to register your interest below. Thanks for sticking around to the end, and I wish you luck with the rest of your day. And by the way, if you want to have a look at some of our other videos, like the 17 strategies to grow your business, we've got over 100 educational videos on our website. So go and take a look. And if you can't find them, then just send me a message and I'll get you set up with a link to watch them.